What if the real reason wealth keeps slipping through your life isn't about how much you make or how hard you work, but what you unconsciously keep giving away? Not to others, but to disorder, to delay, to overlooked corners and containers that no longer know how to hold. In classical feng shui, we often speak of movement, of flow, of invitation, of circulation. But there is a quieter truth beneath that current. Not all things are meant to move. Not all energy is meant to be shared. Some things are meant to be kept. Intention, trust, time. And sometimes the simplest of symbols, like a coin placed gently inside a safe, can reflect whether we are ready to receive or still rehearsing how to let go. This video isn't about superstition or tricks. It's about attention. About what your home is currently saying about your ability to hold what you've asked for. Because in the language of energy, containment is just as sacred as flow. So if you've ever wondered why things feel close, but not quite arriving, why your energy feels productive but not secure, stay with me. We're going to explore the quiet architecture of containment and how to realign the spaces that speak to your ability to keep, to anchor, and to trust. And before we begin, if reflections like this speak to your rhythm, if they feel like the kind of nourishment you want to keep returning to, I gently invite you to support this journey. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers here at New Day Mindfulness. Not for numbers, but so I can continue creating videos like this. Steady, thoughtful, grounded. One quiet insight at a time. Let's begin. 1. The cost of misplaced time. Time isn't just passing, it's placing. And whether we realize it or not, every hour we spend carries the silent authority of investment, not just in tasks or calendars, but in outcomes, rhythms, and meaning. In both classical feng shui and the patterns of modern life, time is not viewed merely as a line we walk across. It's a field, an energy, a current. And how we choose to move through it, or let it move through us, shapes the texture of everything we attempt to create. If you've ever felt like you're working harder than ever and yet somehow still stuck in place, the issue may not be in your ambition, but in your architecture of time. This is a hard truth, but a freeing one, because it suggests that success, whether personal, professional, financial, or emotional, may not always require more action. Sometimes it requires better attention, sharper alignment, and a deeper relationship with space, not just spatial space, but temporal space, the open, the quiet, the unscheduled. There's a story I return to often. It's simple, but it holds weight. A woman I once worked with, let's call her Marianne, was a mid-level manager in a fast-growing tech company in Seattle. Smart, capable, and deeply well-intentioned, she was also exhausted. Her days were a blur of back-to-back Zoom calls, Slack notifications, and project management dashboards. She rarely took a full lunch, answered emails at red lights, and fell asleep most nights with her phone still glowing beside her pillow. Despite her workload, she felt, in her words, like she was getting nowhere. Promotions stalled, team members under-delivered. Her creative edge, once a sharp asset, now felt soft and blunted. During a coaching session, she said something that stopped me. "I don't have time to think anymore. I'm just reacting all day." And there it was. So I gave her a strange assignment. I asked her to start scheduling what I called white space into her calendar. Not break time, not catch-up time, literal space, no meetings, no calls, no tasks, just 30, 60 minutes a day, 3 days a week, marked with a single symbol, a white block. At first, she panicked. "What do I do with the time?" she asked. I said, "Nothing. You sit, you walk, you breathe, you stare out the window, you let your attention return to you." She was skeptical, but she tried. What happened over the next few months surprised both of us. She began making sharper decisions earlier in the day. She noticed when projects were veering off course. Not after they failed, but before they derailed. She began speaking with more clarity in meetings, interrupting herself less and listening with more weight. And perhaps most tangibly, her revenue numbers she was responsible for client retention, began to rise. "I'm not working more," she said. "I'm just less foggy." In Feng Shui, we call this the power of placement. But the principle doesn't just apply to your furniture or your front door. It applies to your schedule, your minutes, your mornings. When we pour our time into chaos, we activate chaos. When we pour it into clarity, we build stability. And here's where it gets deeper. Each of us has what I call a time body. Not just a physical body, but a subtle field that organizes how we move through the hours of the day. Some people wake up clean and sharp. They're morning builders. Others do their best work after dusk. They're twilight reflectors. Some people need silence between tasks. Others need music. Some need 20-minute sprints. Others need long, steady tracks of deep work. But few of us ask, what time rhythm does my energy actually align with? Instead, we let the world decide. Alarms, commutes, notification pings, meeting invites. We let our schedule get built like a junk drawer. Random, cluttered, overly full. And then we wonder why we feel like nothing fits. But what if your calendar wasn't just a tool, but a mirror? What if it reflected not your availability, but your value system? What you truly make room for? And what if every week that passed was actually sculpting not just your career, but your character? In traditional Eastern philosophy, there's a saying, the way you spend your mornings is the way you shape your life. It's not romantic advice. It's an energetic law. You don't need a 5 a.m. routine to be powerful, but you do need to meet the day with some form of self-alignment. Otherwise, you're not participating in time. You're just drowning in it. And here's the cost. Misplaced time creates misplaced energy, and misplaced energy creates misplaced wealth. Because when your life force is scattered across too many windows, tabs, tasks, and responsibilities, you start to forget the core of your own direction. You lose the signal inside the noise. That's how misalignment starts, and that's how it compounds. One missed priority becomes 3. One distraction becomes a habit. One neglected task becomes a backlog. And slowly the energetic infrastructure of your life, not just your job, but your sense of self, starts to tilt off axis. But the solution isn't to do more. It's to return to rhythm, to right placement, to time as a deliberate instrument, not just a container. And yes, this includes honoring rest, not just at night, but in the day. I'm not talking about spa days or long weekends. I'm talking about micro pauses, 10-minute windows between tasks, a moment to close your eyes before opening your inbox, a slow sip of water instead of a rapid scroll. Because time doesn't need more action, it needs more awareness. In the architecture of Feng Shui, time and space are inseparable. The way your room flows shapes how your time flows. A cluttered corner isn't just physical noise, it's temporal noise. It confuses your focus, delays your transitions. It makes everything feel later, even when it's on time. So if you're feeling tired, but you're not sleeping poorly, if you're feeling stuck, but you're doing all the right things, if your life feels too full, but nothing feels quite meaningful, it might not be your effort that's failing you. It might be your placement, your time, your rhythm. The good news? You can shift it. You can begin today, not with a full overhaul, but with one gentle adjustment. Schedule stillness. Create white space. Defend 1 hour a week that belongs to no one but you. Light a candle beside your planner. Write your tasks with breath in your body. Let your appointments serve your energy, not replace it. Because time, in the end, is not just what you measure. It's what you make sacred. And where your time flows, your life follows. Let it flow wisely. 2, the silence of strategy. There is a moment just before something meaningful takes shape, when it requires silence more than celebration. A delicate threshold between thought and form, where intentions are too young to explain and too sacred to display. In classical Feng Shui, this is known not simply as concealment, but as energetic incubation. It is not secrecy out of fear, but quietness out of respect. Like the way a gardener knows not to lift the soil too soon, just to check if the seed is sprouting. In a world saturated with sharing, announcements, previews, and open declarations. This can feel counterintuitive. We're taught to speak our dreams loudly, to put it out into the universe, to document every beginning before it's even begun. But sometimes attention is heat, and too much heat on something not yet rooted can cause it to wilt before it ever grows. The logic in feng shui is subtle but firm. When energy is in its gestational stage, it is most vulnerable. The direction of a safe, for instance, matters not just for flow, but for protection. Wealth, like an idea, needs time to gather. It needs boundaries. It needs to be shielded from eyes that may not understand its rhythm. Just as we wouldn't place a seedling beneath a spotlight, we don't overexpose our financial or creative intentions in their earliest phases. There is a popular metaphor among energy practitioners. Don't throw a lantern over a sprouting plant. It will burn before it grows. This is not poetic exaggeration. It's a warning against mistaking visibility for strength. What is incubating needs darkness, softness, stillness. That is where roots learn how to hold. In the modern world, you can see this principle at play, quietly but consistently. Consider Elon Musk. For all his public persona now, many of his most strategic acquisitions, technological pivots, and funding mechanisms began in near silence. No press release, no roadmap reveal, just a series of quiet moves, stacked like coins in the corner of a safe, until the structure was unshakable. This is not accidental. This is how energy builds best. In stillness, in preparation, in shadow, before light. Contrast that with the entrepreneurs who promise the world before a single prototype is made, the ones who go viral before they go viable. There's a reason so many of them burn out. Not because they lack vision, but because they've asked their dreams to withstand too much spotlight before their systems are stable enough to carry weight. Even in personal finance, the pattern repeats. Those who speak less often about money, who quietly track, tend, and align, tend to have longer-lasting reserves. Their wealth is not reactionary. It is rooted, because they don't treat money as a performance. They treat it as a relationship, a quiet one, a listening one. So what does this mean in the home? In feng shui, we ask, where do you place your intentions? And do you respect the timing of their bloom? For example, if you keep your financial documents in plain sight, constantly reviewed, constantly worried over, it can create a feedback loop of anxiety. But if you store them with intention, in a place that feels held, secure, unbothered, that symbolic act reinforces trust. It says, this is tended but not obsessed over. Likewise, not every corner of your home needs to proclaim what you're working toward. Let there be one drawer, one journal, one envelope that carries your most sacred plans. Not hidden because they are shameful, hidden because they are tender. They are still becoming. This is the silence of strategy. It is not passive. It is not delay. It is the knowing that what's important doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to be protected, shaped, and aligned before it is shared. Because when the time is right, what has been growing in silence will no longer need to be introduced. It will simply arrive, fully formed, undeniably present, and the world will recognize it. Not because you shouted, but because you listened, because you waited, because you let the seed choose its own time to bloom. 3. Health is the wealth container. A worn-out body is like a cracked jar. It doesn't matter how much abundance you try to pour into it. Money, attention, recognition. It slips through the fractures. Slowly at first, then completely. You keep trying to fill it, and yet you end up tired. Not because you're weak, but because your vessel was never sealed. This is one of the quietest truths in feng shui, rarely talked about in mainstream circles, yet foundational in classical philosophy. Health is not separate from wealth. It is the vessel in which wealth lives. And when that vessel is neglected, what you build has nowhere to settle. Like tea poured onto cracked porcelain, like rain that can't soak into dry, hardened ground. In the 5-element system, health is rooted in earth, not flashy, not quick, but reliable, regenerative, and quiet in its power. The earth element governs the stomach, the spleen, and the muscles. not just in the body, but in the metaphysical blueprint of energy. It governs digestion, transformation, and containment. This is not coincidence. It's an echo. What your body can process, your life can hold. We often associate wealth with fire, fast, bold, upward. But earth is where it rests. Without earth, fire scorches and burns out. Without earth, water floods and cannot be stored. Without earth, even metal has nothing to form within. Earth doesn't just stabilize, it receives. And that's what health does too. It receives what you give it and gives it back tenfold when cared for. But when forgotten, it becomes the first leak in your fortune. Look around at modern life and ask, are we honoring our earth element? Do we eat seated or while scrolling? Do we sleep in rhythm with the sun or fight the night with stimulants? Do we schedule rest with the same seriousness we schedule meetings? Because if your energy is constantly being borrowed to keep your body running, how can it be allocated toward anything else? This isn't just philosophy, it's physiological. When your body is inflamed, chronically tired, or oversaturated with cortisol, your decision-making skews towards short-term choices. Your ability to manage risk narrows. Your inner compass gets clouded. And your financial decisions, even when seemingly strategic, are made from a place of survival, not trust. When we speak of containers in feng shui, we're not only talking about bowls, jars, or safes. We're talking about the body as the first container. The breath, the skin, the organs, the way you move through a room, all of it says, I am either holding my energy or hemorrhaging it. There's an ancient Chinese saying, don't build the storehouse before you fix the roof. In other words, don't chase after accumulation when your foundation is leaking. And in modern language, don't scale if you haven't sealed. The irony is, we often use wealth as a tool to compensate for what health is trying to signal. We work harder to afford supplements. We burn longer to afford a retreat. We spend more to feel less empty. But the root of the pattern remains unaddressed. It's not that we don't have the means to heal, it's that we're too cracked to hold the healing. A CEO I once worked with shared something quietly powerful. At the height of her success, she began experiencing micro-blackouts, just 10 seconds at a time. No diagnosis could pinpoint the cause. Her labs were clean, her stress suppressed, her schedule ruthlessly optimized. But nothing could explain the disconnect between her high performance and her silent collapse. Until a feng shui practitioner asked one simple question, where do you sit to eat? She couldn't remember. Everything in her life had been planned, except nourishment. Meals were fuel, not rhythm. Her home had a dining table that hadn't been used in years. Her fridge was full, but her body was depleted. It wasn't about food, it was about containment. The practitioner introduced an earth practice, not a cure, but a return. One seated meal a day, facing a calming landscape photo. No phone, no rush, just presence. 3 months later, her blackout stopped. Not because of magic, because her nervous system finally had a container. In feng shui, placement is expression. Where you place your body when you eat, when you sleep, when you breathe, sends a message to your internal architecture. This moment matters, or this is just something to get through. So if your bed is placed like an afterthought, your meals are consumed like obligations, and your routines are powered by stimulants, ask yourself, what message are you sending to your earth element? That it's replaceable, that it must endure, that fortune matters more than foundation? Now pause. What if you reverse that? What if you nourished your body as if it were your only vault? Because it is. Your muscles hold more emotional memory than your diary. Your breath contains more power than your to-do list. Your gut holds more intuitive wealth than any spreadsheet can calculate. So what can you do? Not everything, just one thing today. Maybe it's clearing the space under your bed to let energy circulate while you sleep. Maybe it's placing a yellow cloth on your table to invite groundedness during meals. Maybe it's simply lighting one candle when you eat. Not for ambiance, but for remembrance. Because health is not just a lifestyle choice. It's a spiritual architecture. And your body is not just a tool for work. It is a message to life itself. I am willing to carry what I ask to receive. We often ask, How can I attract more wealth? But maybe the question is simpler. How do I treat what I already carry? Am I generous to it or impatient? Am I proud of it or always trying to fix it? The answer doesn't come in a supplement bottle or a finance book. It comes when your home, your body, and your breath speak the same language. Grounded, clear, and ready. Because when your earth is steady, your fortune has a place to land. And nothing flows toward a cracked jar, but everything flows toward a vessel that knows how to hold. 4. Don't trade your integrity for approval. In the architecture of any lasting life, there is always one blueprint we cannot draw on paper: our moral foundation. Integrity is not something you decorate with. It's not on the walls, not in the view, not in the lighting. But when it's missing, you feel it instantly. The space collapses, the structure creaks, the air becomes uncertain. In Feng Shui, we speak often of alignment, of the door meeting the stairs with balance, of the bed facing the wall with support, of the altar catching the morning light. But beyond the physical orientation of your home is the ethical alignment of your choices. And no placement in the world can compensate for the disorientation of selling out your core truth for short-term praise. Approval is intoxicating. It makes us feel visible, validated, chosen. But the approval of others is often tied to conditions, to the version of you they want, not the one that's quietly evolving. The most dangerous form of stagnation is the one that dresses itself up as momentum. You move, yes, but towards someone else's center, not your own. You build, yes, but on borrowed ground. And when that ground shifts, as it always does, the collapse is not just external, it's internal. You lose not just position, but peace. There's a phrase in traditional energy practice: clear water doesn't rush, meaning clarity doesn't need noise, and integrity doesn't need applause. One of the most understated examples of this principle in action is Keanu Reeves. In a world addicted to noise and spectacle, he remains profoundly silent, not because he lacks depth, but because he refuses to spend his depth on things that don't honor it. He's walked away from roles that didn't feel right. He's turned down contracts that compromised soul for spectacle. He doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to convince. Because integrity, once embodied, doesn't need marketing. It resonates. There's a kind of energy that only gathers when we stop bending to be liked. When we stop adjusting our principles to match what's trending. When we stop giving our light to rooms that feed on our dimness. And this doesn't mean being inflexible. It means knowing where your line lives, where your breath deepens, where your spine straightens. It means asking in every decision, not just will this succeed, but will this keep me whole? In the feng shui of the self, approval is not a direction, it's a distraction. Integrity is the true compass. You may lose some audiences along the way. You may lose some praise, but you will not lose yourself. And that's the only energy that was ever meant to stay. So as you sit with this thought, perhaps ask gently, where in your life are you building something beautiful on a foundation you don't believe in? Where have you allowed applause to replace alignment? And where, with quiet courage, could you say no? Not out of rebellion, but out of reverence for what you're here to protect? In every home, there are corners that hold the strongest beams. And in every life, there are moments that define your frame. Let that frame be true. Let it be quiet. Let it be yours. 5. Expertise requires boundaries. Expertise is not meant to leak. It is not meant to drip endlessly, like a neglected faucet, into hands that never asked for the depth behind it. True skill, real cultivated, scarred by experience skill, is not something you scatter at every turn to prove your worth. It's something you contain, refine, and offer with clarity. Because when something has taken you years to build, giving it away without a boundary isn't generosity, it's erosion. In classical feng shui, there is a principle that earth must support metal. Symbolically, this means wisdom, precision, structure, all qualities governed by the metal element, must rest on the stabilizing foundation of earth. Earth is containment. It is definition. It is the line drawn around the valuable, the sacred, the earned. Without it, metal becomes sharp, erratic, lost in its own reflection. But when earth is strong, when your sense of boundary, value, and foundation is firm, then metal gleams, then skill has focus, then your presence doesn't just radiate, it commands. There is an unspoken tension in our modern world. The idea that if you love something, you should give it freely. That if your work is creative or soulful, or somehow not labor, then it shouldn't be priced. It should be shared. And while yes, there is beauty in contribution and a time for offering, there is also a time for protecting, for claiming, for declaring with quiet confidence. I have shaped this with my time, with my energy, with my breath, and I am not a river that forgets its own banks. Let me tell you a story. She was 27, a textile designer in Hanoi, gifted, humble, and perpetually overbooked. When she started her studio, she offered her designs for free, logos, illustrations, patterns, all in the name of building her name. And the requests kept coming. Friends, friends of friends, strangers, all wanting just a quick piece, all praising her work but treating her time like air, invisible, infinite, unmeasured. At first she felt proud, needed, seen. But something strange happened after about a year. She began to dread her work. She stopped answering emails. She lost her appetite for color. Her wrists hurt, her eyes burned, and one night she sat staring at her tablet and whispered, "I don't even know what my style is anymore." A friend, who happened to be a feng shui consultant, visited her apartment. She didn't touch the creative tools. She didn't even ask about the business. She walked straight to a small metal safe in the corner of the designer's bedroom. It was open, stuffed with old receipts, a half-used candle, and tangled charging cables. She said gently, "What holds your energy is confused, so your energy is confused." The designer didn't understand, not fully, but she cleaned the safe. She removed everything. She placed one thing inside, a folded note with the words, "Clear value calls in clear energy." And then the next day, she started charging. Not aggressively, not as punishment, but as clarity. And within 2 months, everything changed. She lost half her clients. But the ones who stayed, they paid double. They respected her timelines. They referred clients who didn't ask for free. And most importantly, she started sketching again. For herself, for joy, for the first time in months. This wasn't magic. It wasn't overnight transformation. It was alignment, earth supporting metal, boundary supporting brilliance. Because when you don't value your own expertise, the world mirrors that back. And when you pretend that your energy is endless, people will treat it as such. There is a cultural myth that saying no is selfish, that pricing your work is harsh. But look closer. Who benefits from that myth? Often the ones who take without giving, the ones who want the shine of your metal without the patience of your earth. In energetic terms, your boundary is your container. It is the safe where your attention lives. If that container is leaky, if you are constantly agreeing, accommodating, performing without pause, then the currency of your mind, your time, your creative fire becomes diluted. That's why so many gifted people feel exhausted. Not because they lack inspiration, but because their inspiration has nowhere to land. It is scattered across too many requests, too many projects that don't pay, too many yeses said in fear of seeming difficult. Here's the quiet truth. People respect what you respect. If you treat your work like air, others will inhale it and walk away. If you treat it like gold, not flashy but formed, they will pause before they reach. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means you're allowed to say, "Here is what I charge." You're allowed to write, "I'd love to help. Here's my rate." You're allowed to create tiers, timelines, contracts, not to build walls, but to shape doors, so that those who value what you offer can walk through with respect, not with assumption. And energetically, your space should mirror that. Where is your work honored? Where is it scattered? Look at your desk. Is it a pile of unpaid effort or a curated space of value? Look at your calendar. Is it full of tasks that nourish you or obligations you accepted in the name of being nice? Look at your bank account, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Is it holding what it should, or is it echoing the same leak you feel in your time? Because these things are not separate. In feng shui, the space holds the pattern, the metal holds the memory, and when you begin to hold yourself, not tightly, but deliberately, everything else begins to hold too. I leave you with this. Imagine a coin, small, simple, yet ancient, balanced between round and square, between heaven and earth. It doesn't beg to be used, it waits to be chosen. That's your expertise, not loud, not desperate, but waiting for you to remember that it's already enough. And when you do, the clients shift, the requests change, the energy steadies, because what is respected is what is protected, and what is protected begins to shine. Let your work shine, not through overgiving, but through grounding, through clarity, through earth. That is how metal gleams. That is how wisdom becomes wealth. That is how you reclaim the rhythm of your energy, not as a flood, but as a river with direction. And that is how fortune, the kind that lasts, finds its way home. 6. Opportunities aren't meant to be apologized for. There comes a moment in every life when a door opens, not by force, not through noise, but because something within you was finally in alignment with what stood on the other side. And when it does, when that door arrives quietly but undeniably, the question is rarely, is this mine? The question more often is, do I deserve to walk through it? We've been conditioned, subtly, persistently, to mistake humility for hesitation, to believe that claiming space somehow denies others theirs, that standing fully in what has come to meet you is selfish, or boastful, or bold in the wrong way. But feng shui and the deeper, older wisdom beneath it does not frame movement as arrogance. It frames movement as inevitability when conditions are right. In the feng shui tradition, the dragon holds a special place, not just as a symbol of power, but as a reminder that real power does not shrink to make others more comfortable. It does not apologize for what it was designed to do. The dragon moves forward. It does not explain itself. It does not hover in the air and wait for permission. Its wings are wide because they were grown to cover distance. Its breath is fire, not to destroy, but to clear space. When a dragon appears in one's energetic landscape, it signals a call to leadership, to presence, to ownership of one's impact. And yet, many of us, when dragon moments arise in our lives, when the door opens unexpectedly, or an invitation comes that feels bigger than we imagined, don't roar. We retreat. We defer. We downplay. We say things like, maybe this was meant for someone else, or I'll wait until the time is more perfect, or who am I to take this spot? But the wiser question is, who am I not to? There is an ancient rhythm that runs beneath opportunities, a current that has less to do with luck and more to do with readiness. And the door that opens for you, it does so because the space you've cleared, within and without, made it possible. It doesn't open at random. It opens because something recognized you. It opens because you showed up, quietly, persistently, even when no one was watching. This is not selfishness. This is not ego. This is not about standing in front of others. It's about standing fully in your own life. J.K. Rowling is a powerful modern echo of this truth. When she first sent out the manuscript for Harry Potter, she was rejected by 12 publishers. Some wanted her to rewrite the story, others wanted to reposition it. She had every reason to conform, to soften her vision, to make the story more palatable to commercial tastes. But she didn't. Not because she was arrogant, but because she was aligned. She knew what the story needed to be. And even as a single mother living on government assistance, she did not apologize for holding that vision. Eventually, the right door opened, not because she forced it, but because she stayed still in her knowing. And that is the deeper principle here. We are not here to elbow others aside. We are not here to dominate, but we are also not here to shrink, to excuse, or to stand at the threshold of our own lives, waiting for someone else to give us permission to enter. Feng Shui is not about rearranging furniture. It is about rearranging relationship, the relationship between you and your environment, between you and your readiness. And when you design a space that is worthy of opportunity, you must also cultivate the inner stance to meet what comes. Ask yourself, what in your life have you quietly stepped away from, not because it wasn't yours, but because you didn't think you were allowed to claim it? What opportunities arrived and found you whispering, maybe later? There is no shame in caution. There is wisdom in discernment, but there is also a danger in delay, because the longer we wait to receive what was always meant for us, the more we reinforce the belief that we are not meant for it. The dragon is not afraid of timing. It knows that right action and right place are always partners. And when you feel that unmistakable spark, that invitation that comes not just to your calendar, but to your spirit, the most honorable thing you can do is accept it. Not with arrogance, but with alignment. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give the world is your willingness to stop apologizing for being prepared. Let that be your compass. Not comparison, not consensus, but readiness. And when the next door opens, don't bow, don't second guess, don't wait for the echo of approval. Step through with breath, with presence, with the quiet power of someone who finally remembered not just what they have worked for, but what they're ready to hold. 7. Energy leaks that steal more than luck. In classical feng shui, energy loss doesn't always come from broken mirrors, misaligned furniture, or a cracked doorway. Sometimes the biggest leaks happen in places that no compass can measure, through habits of the mind and the subtle choices of our day. In modern life, where distraction is currency and visibility feels like survival, we often give away our energy not through a single decision, but in thousands of micro moments. Glances, swipes, comparisons, confessions. And without even realizing it, we begin to deplete the very reservoir we've spent so long trying to build. The ancient masters didn't have smartphones or inboxes flooded with algorithmic urgency, but they understood the danger of dispersal. In feng shui terms, qi thrives where attention is whole, where boundaries are intact, where intention is clear. But today, many of us wake up and hand our energy away before our feet touch the floor. We open our phones and scroll, not because we want to know, but because we've forgotten how to be still. We tell the world too much too often, and in doing so, we teach our qi to scatter. Oversharing isn't vulnerability. It's unmanaged leakage. Every time we give the sacred parts of ourselves away without containment, we dilute our power. It isn't just about social media. It's about every place where we blur the line between signal and noise. Late night doom scrolling, emotional venting without grounding, overscheduling, constantly re-explaining ourselves to people who aren't ready to hear. Each one seems harmless, but together they turn the vessel of our energy into a sieve. The body feels it first. The mind begins to race. Sleep becomes shallow, digestion slow. You start forgetting things, not because you're aging, but because your energetic circuits are overloaded, like a computer with too many tabs open. And eventually that sense of control, of sovereignty, begins to slip. The principle here is simple. Energy flows where attention goes. But if your attention is fractured, your energy has nowhere to land. That's not just bad for focus, it's devastating for fortune. Because in feng shui, wealth isn't an amount, it's a quality of retention. A household can't become abundant if it's constantly leaking vitality. A person can't magnetize opportunity if they've broadcasted every hope before it has time to root. In practical terms, this is why disciplines of rest, food, and intention matter. Not as routines, but as re-anchoring rituals. Meals at regular times, not rushed, not distracted. Tell the body, you're safe to receive. Going to bed without artificial light teaches the nervous system how to close, how to retreat from the world without apology. Protecting your mornings from instant stimulation, no emails, no news, no comparison, gives qi a chance to collect before it disperses. There's an old metaphor often used in Taoist cultivation. Your qi is a candle. Protect the wick. This isn't poetic indulgence, it's physics. Your life force, like a flame, depends on three things: shelter from the wind, a clear container, and clean fuel. Without these, it flickers. Without these, it dies out long before the wax is spent. So in the context of your home, your phone, your calendar, ask, where is wind stealing your fire? What do you expose to the world before it's ready? Which moments of quiet are constantly interrupted by the impulse to check, to speak, to explain? The challenge here is not to become a recluse or a monk. It's to build a practice of subtle privacy, to create moments in the day, even 5 minutes, where you are whole and unseen, where your intentions aren't for display, but for alignment. And if you want a practical place to start, here's a ritual rooted in both feng shui and energetic containment. At the end of each day, before bed, hold one object that matters to you, something small, maybe a coin, a photo, a simple bead. And instead of planning or worrying, simply breathe with it. Let it become a symbol of what you're holding close, what you're choosing not to explain, not to announce, not to scatter. Let that object absorb your stillness. Place it by your bed, not as a charm, but as a promise. I am learning not to leak. The impact of this practice is not dramatic. It's cumulative. Over time, your body will feel heavier in the right way, more rooted, more rested. The chatter of your thoughts will soften, and in that clarity, opportunity begins to notice you again. Not because you called for it, but because you stopped pushing it away. This is the quiet logic of energy, not fast, not loud, but unwavering. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do for your future is to tend to the wick, not the flame. Because when the base is protected, the light takes care of itself. 8. A final story, the tailor who stopped apologizing. In the heart of Hoi An, where the walls glow like turmeric at sunset and the air holds the memory of thread and steam, there lived a tailor named Lin. For over 3 decades, she worked in a modest street-facing shop, no larger than a single-car garage, with wooden shutters that opened each morning to greet the soft shuffle of bicycles and early rice vendors. Her hands, small and swift, had mended countless ao-dai, hems and refit wedding jackets that had passed from one generation to the next. And yet, despite her quiet mastery, Lin rarely charged what her labor was worth. Clients loved her. They praised her work. Some brought her imported fabrics from Singapore and Bangkok. Others came faithfully year after year for festival fittings. But Lin had a habit, a soft, nearly invisible reflex that defined the energy of her business. She apologized often for prices, for turnaround times, for hems that, even when flawless, might have been a centimeter too generous. It wasn't insecurity exactly, it was modesty, laced with a long history of self-sacrifice. She had learned early, perhaps too early, that women who raised their voices were less beloved, and that in service, humility was currency. So she undercharged, she overworked. And as years passed, something unexpected began to unravel. Not her skill, but her spark. It wasn't obvious at first, but the energy shifted. Orders became last minute. Clients haggled more. She accepted rush jobs without question. Her shop was always full, yet she felt emptier with each stitch. Her bank account, though steady, was not growing. Her eyes, once bright behind the sewing machine, began to look further down and further in. The rhythm of abundance had been replaced by the dull hum of endurance. One evening, after a long week of overnight orders and cold dinners, Lin sat in her shop alone. The town was quiet, the lanterns outside still flickering, though tourists had long since gone in for the night. On her table was a jacket for a man who'd asked for a complex alteration and promised to pay later again. Her hands paused over the chalk lines. Something inside her exhaled, deep and final. That weekend, a friend came to visit from Da Nang, a woman who ran a modest flower shop and had recently started studying feng shui with a local master. Over tea, Lin shared her exhaustion, not dramatically but plainly. Her friend listened quietly and then said something simple. Your prices aren't the problem, it's your boundaries. You've made your work sacred, but your space doesn't know it yet. She reached into her bag and handed Lin 2 items, a slender red cotton thread and a gold coin with a square hole in the center. This isn't magic, she said gently, but it's a message. Tie the thread 3 times, place it near where your hands begin their work. Don't use it to ask for more. Use it to match your worth. Lin didn't say much, but that night, she cleared a small space on the corner of her cutting table. She wiped it clean, laid a red square of fabric, coiled the thread, tied gently, placed the coin. And before turning off the light, she whispered to the room, "Let this space match what I offer." Nothing changed the next day, or the day after that. There was no sudden influx of wealthy customers, no dramatic testimonials, but something quieter began to shift. She declined one last-minute order with politeness and firmness. She raised her prices by a small, meaningful amount and did not explain. When someone asked for a discount, she smiled and said, "My work is priced with care." She moved slower but more precisely. Her back hurt less, her food tasted better. And then, over weeks, the clientele changed, not in number, but in tone. People lingered less. They came with clearer expectations. Some even brought her gifts: jasmine tea, fragrant soap, a book of poetry. Line, who once feared scarcity, began to understand something deeper. She didn't need more orders. She needed better ones. She needed alignment. The coin did not change her fortune, it changed her field. Energetically, what happened was not mystery, but resonance. In feng shui, coins carry the element of metal, not only representing wealth, but clarity, boundary, and mental structure. When placed with intention, they don't attract, they reflect. They sharpen the dialogue between space and self. And red, as we know, is the element of fire. Activation, visibility, recognition. The thread did not speak in spells, it spoke in rhythm, in the language of balance. From a technical perspective, the coin beneath her scissors became what classical feng shui calls an anchor. Not a weight, but a point of reference. A reminder that the work she did was not reactionary. It was deliberate. That her energy, like the thread she wove, deserved not only circulation, but containment. What Lynn learned, without textbooks or courses, was the lesson most modern spaces overlook. That prosperity is not summoned by chaos. It responds to consistency. It is not magnetized by urgency. It is held by quiet precision. And that any act done with presence, be it sewing a sleeve or folding a note into a safe, is already a ritual. You may not be a tailor, but you might know the feeling of apologizing for your prices, for your presence, of placing your value in the hands of others who do not know how to hold it. If so, take this not as instruction, but as invitation. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need to light incense or chant mantras. You simply need to choose one object, one coin, one thread, one corner, and make it sacred by how you treat it. Let it match what you offer. Let your home reflect what you're finally ready to receive. Not because you demand it, but because you deserve it. And that knowing, once it lands, never ask permission again. So we return, not to a conclusion, but to a question. When we look at the quiet corners of our home, the bowl on the shelf, the safe in the closet, the coin we forgot we placed, what are they whispering back to us? Are they containers of intention, or are they echo chambers for what we've avoided? We often think of fortune as something we must pursue. But what if fortune is simply waiting for a cleaner vessel, a more stable floor, a moment of reverence we forgot to offer? Because wealth doesn't only rise with action. Sometimes it rises with stillness, with space, with the quiet decision to stop leaking through distractions, cluttered thresholds, or unattended symbols. So I ask you gently, what is one small place in your life, a drawer, a relationship, a habit, that quietly drains what you've worked so hard to preserve? What might shift if you honored it as a keeper, not just a container? Let your attention be the altar. Let your care be the invitation. And if this reflection offered you a new lens, a soft nudge, or even just a breath of clarity, I warmly invite you to leave a comment. Share what space in your home or life you feel ready to tend to again. And if you feel called to walk this path a little further with me, please like, share, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. I'm on a slow, intentional journey to reach 1,000 subscribers, not for visibility, but for sustainability, so I can continue to offer these quiet explorations, not rushed, not loud, but rooted. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your listening. Until next time.